Hey AP Econ, this is a video about one section of chapter 12, pages 304 to 307. And in this section we're going to address the spending multiplier and how it works, what it is, and what it will look like on your AP test. The multiplier is a formula. You need to know it. It's something you need to memorize. And it is the sum of a geometric series. And not to get all too math on you, but the sum of a geometric series is 1 over 1 minus n. And normally n refers to the ratio by which a series changes. For example, if a series changes by the fraction of 4/5, so if n equals 4/5, so every section, so like if it's but the first term is 1, and then the next term is 4/5, and then the next term is 16/25. You see I'm multiplying by 4/5 each time. What is the summation of a series? Like this will converge, right? Like this number is actually smaller than this number, which is smaller than this number. So let's actually use that number to help us out. On the AP test, you will not be given a calculator or allowed to use one, so we're going to need to do everything kind of by hand. So let's say the spending multiplier, we're going to calculate it from our MPC. MPC is the ratio by which we consume our money. And let's say that it's 4/5 or 0.8. So now we have to figure out what is the multiplier. The multiplier is 1 over 1 minus the MPC. So I'll let you think about that. Try and figure out like in your head or on paper, what is the multiplier? What's it going to be? Pause the video if you need to. So the multiplier in this case, you should have figured out, is 1 over 1 minus 4/5. And I'm going to go horizontally here with my math work. And so if the multiplier is, let me write up here, geometric series. If the multiplier is 1 over 1 minus 4/5, then that's 1 over 1/5. And according to the law of fractions, this is 1 divided by 1/5, which is basically 1 times 5 over 1. That's how this works, dividing by a fraction. And that equals 5. So that is my spending multiplier. I'm going to use it to multiply by something, but how does this work? Like how would I use this to multiply in a real economic situation? Well, let's figure this out. Let's say this is our marginal propensity to consume across the whole nation, that it's 4/5. If we encounter a situation where we're in a recession and the government wants to boost GDP, so what it does is it increases government spending by $100 billion. The government increases spending by $100 billion. What impact will that have on the economy? Well, you know what? We get to use our spending multiplier. If there's an increase in autonomous investment, let's say there's an increase in government, or there's an increase in like investment or something, anything that causes an increase in the spending, like if there's a sudden influx of money, generally on the AP test you'll see this as the government increases its autonomous spending by $100 billion. What will happen? We're going to use the spending multiplier to figure this out. It'll give you that the government spent $100 billion, and then it'll give you that the MPC equals 0.8, or 4/5. And so you'll need to use the multiplier, and then you'll eventually do your work. You'll figure out that you need to do 100 billion times 5. To find out that if the government does some autonomous spending, it will increase the economy by $500 billion this has implications. This means that the government doesn't need, let's say we're in a $500 billion recessionary gap. Let's say, I'm going to draw this in one color, sorry. Let's say we're in a recessionary gap, and the difference here is $500 billion or $500 billion. We don't need to increase spending by $500 billion. We only need to increase it by $100 billion, knowing that the marginal propensity to consume is 4/5. How does this work? How does this 5 mean that we get $500 billion? One way to think about this is to like actually map it out. Start mapping it out from each term. If I have this first $100 billion, if I'm the government, fictionally I could just spend it at one location. I could spend it at Walmart. And Walmart would then pass it on to its employees, who spend 4/5 of that, which means there would be $80 billion left over. What's happening to the rest of it is being saved. 20% is being saved. And then 4/5 of that would be 64 billion is left over. And then 4/5 of that would be 50 something, and so on and so forth. And if I add up all these terms, 100 plus 80 plus 64 plus 50-ish plus on and on and on and on and on to the last person who sees this money, then I will end up with a sum of a series being $500 billion, an increase in GDP, or an increase in aggregate demand. So when the government increases its spending, we see an increase in aggregate demand, right? That's going to have an impact there on aggregate demand, on our aggregate supply and demand graph. And it will have a $500 billion or $500 billion impact. So that's how the multiplier works. Now let me give you a couple practice problems for you to experiment with this. You can pause the video while I'm doing this. What I'm going to provide for you is the increase in spending and the marginal propensity to consume. Let's say that each time the increase in government spending is equal to $1 trillion. So on your own really quick, pause the video. Let's say that the MPC is 0.5. Let's say that in example 2, the MPC is 0.9. In example 3, the MPC is 0.99. And let's say that in the fourth example, MPC equals 1, meaning we consume every little bit of each dollar we get. So in each case, what is the spending multiplier in each of these? Go ahead, at this point, pause the video and try to think about it. So if you've paused the video and you're back with me, you'll realize that the multiplier in this case would be 2, because it's 1 over 0.5, which is 1 over 1/2. In this case, the multiplier would be 10, because it's 1 over 1/10. In this case, the multiplier would be 100, because it's 1 over 1/100th. And in this example, we get a weird thing. We get 1 over 0, which, if you are into like math theory and stuff, could theoretically be infinity, maybe. In actuality, you know, people don't just consume every little bit, but people consume a lot. So the multiplier is actually, in real life, probably quite high. So this is almost the end of chapter 12. We're going to talk about the Keynesian cross, and that'll be the end of this chapter.